Ken Vogel is the chief investigative reporter for Politico, good enough to join us now to discuss it all. And Ken, I would like to start by getting your response, both to the report that we saw in Bloomberg, that quote specifically, as well as the response we just saw and heard from Governor Pence.
Yeah, voter suppression tends to have a certain connotation for most political observers. That is, depriving people of the right and the ability to vote when they actually turn out to vote. Charitably looking at that quote, I don't think that that's what they meant, put it in the context of the story. I think that what they meant is essentially driving down the opponent's vote. And that is something that is pretty standard political tactics, albeit not something that you would admit to. And Mike Pence's rebuttal there, I think, applies to both of those scenarios. It both, is a rejection of this idea that they're trying to drive down Hillary Clinton's vote, which of course they're trying to do. I mean, come on, let's just be honest here. As is Hillary Clinton's campaign trying to drive down Donald Trump's vote. That's why you go negative in a campaign. And that's, I think, what they were referring to when they talk about those three pools of voters who they're trying to suppress, or who, again, charitably, whose turnout they're trying to drag down. White liberals, those are sort of like the Bernie Sanders supporters. You see Donald Trump hitting on some themes that might discourage them from voting for Hillary Clinton, such as talking about how the election was rigged against Bernie Sanders, how Hillary Clinton has been back and forth on TPP, some of these trade deals that liberals oppose. Another bucket of voters that they're trying to drive down is the African-American support. You see them doing that by Donald Trump hammering Hillary Clinton for calling young African-Americans in the criminal justice system super predators. This is back in the 1990s when Bill Clinton was trying to push through the crime bill. And then you see them trying to drive down turnout among young women for Hillary Clinton. And they're doing that by hitting on these allegations of Bill Clinton's sexual impropriety. That's, I think, the strategy.
Ken, I want to turn to something of a specialty for you, perhaps the real politic, certainly 11 days out, and that's the state of the money race in the two campaigns. And the latest numbers out from the report now show this. Hillary Clinton is ahead of Donald Trump by nearly $100 million. I know you have said you have not seen anything like this before in presidential politics. That is certainly something with regard to perspective. What do you mean?
I mean, it's a huge mismatch because it's not just that cash advantage down the home stretch, and that $100 million advantage is pretty real time as far as these numbers go. It's often tough to get these numbers in real time, but that reflects $100 million that Hillary Clinton, the Democratic National Committee, and the committees that she has formed with the DNC, as well as her super PACs, have over Donald Trump, the joint committee that Donald Trump has with the RNC and his super PACs as of October 20th. So just a few days ago. And that shows that with the final 3 weeks of the election, that's how much more that Hillary Clinton's campaign has to burn and her allies have to burn than Donald Trump. I think that advantage is only growing, though, because Hillary Clinton continues down the stretch to hold these high dollar fundraisers with surrogates like Cher, like Jay-Z, like Jennifer Lopez, huge draws, while Donald Trump not doing any major fundraisers with the RNC. She's already spent a ton more money than him building a vastly superior infrastructure, and she's just going to be able to fuel it that much more down the home stretch. That really gets into questions about just how lopsided the get out the vote operation is going to be between these two campaigns.
And we just showed a tweet from your colleague Gabriel DiBenedetti, who said with that $153 million cash on hand, as we show it again here, that means the Clinton campaign can spend some $8 million per day. Adding perhaps then to the woes for the Trump campaign, our Major Garrett reported to us earlier today that some Trump donors, meanwhile, are essentially waiting for the candidate himself to put more of his money into his own campaign before they contribute any more. Are you hearing similar accounts?
Yeah, we've heard that for some time. It's not uncommon for a candidate it's not uncommon for a wealthy candidate to face pressure from their donors, even when they haven't made such a big deal out of self-funding as Donald Trump did. Mitt Romney didn't put a dime of his money into his 2012 presidential campaign after having spent $45 million on his 2008 campaign. Down the stretch of 2012, he was raising a lot of money, and donors were willing to give it to him, but there were even some who wanted to see him put in money. With Donald Trump, you have the inflated sort of expectation because Trump himself has bragged about how much money he's spending on his campaign. And recently I was out on the trail with him. He started saying that by the end, he was going to end up having spent $100 million. Well, guess what? He's absolutely nowhere close to that. He's about $56 million in as of October 19th, and he only put in $31,000 in the first 3 weeks of this month. So if he's going to get to that $100 million, either he's going to have to write a $44 million check very soon,
right,
or like so much else with Donald Trump, it's maybe just bluster.
But so, Ken, I mean, is that what to make of what is a remarkable discrepancy by any measure?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a lot of bluster, frankly, from everyone I talked to around Donald Trump. He is incredibly miserly with his money and was reluctant to spend his own money on the campaign, was reluctant to spend the campaign's money, which was raised from others during the general election, on some of the nuts and bolts things required for running a presidential campaign. So I would be shocked, frankly, if he ended up putting in that additional $44 million to get him over the $100 million in self-funding hump.
Meanwhile, back to the Clinton campaign here. The document dumps from WikiLeaks continue by the day. Do you think that the campaign at this point can continue to pivot to this blanket response regarding Russians looking to influence the election? Or with 11 days out, at some point, are they going to need to change course and be, if nothing else, more specific?
Well, I mean, from a reporter's perspective, it's incredibly frustrating, that response, because there's a lot of pretty interesting information that gives a lot of context about the Clintons' dealings over the last, 10 years, really, back to the 2008 campaign in those emails. I think someone's going to write an amazing book off of them. The question about whether Hillary Clinton is going to have to actually answer for the content of the emails before the election, I don't think she will. I don't think there's any indication that she feels any need, or her campaign feels any urgency to change its strategy at this point. That said, I think these are going to continue to prove fodder for reporters, for critics, for potentially congressional investigators on the right in the Republican Party who are promising to make Hillary Clinton's presidency, if she wins, one that is has her on the defensive much of the time. So I think that eventually they probably will have to address the content in a much more specific way, but probably not before the election.
Meanwhile, our Nancy Cordes said today, perhaps we're getting also a look at PR 101. Change the narrative. And so that brings me to the news today that perhaps Vice President Joe Biden, which CBS News has now confirmed, is on a short list to be Hillary Clinton's Secretary of State. I know Politico is in fact reporting that he sits at the top of that list at present. Certainly would be news to, among others, Wendy Sherman. What more can you tell us?
I mean, it makes sense on a certain intuitive level that this guy has such long and solid relationships in the Senate that he could potentially avoid a confirmation battle like a lot of other Hillary Clinton nominees might face. And, of course, he has deep experience in foreign policy. So it makes sense. Now, whether a sitting vice president would want to stick around and be Secretary of State, I mean, who knows? That said, I think this is a little bit, it is an effort to shift attention, but it's also a little bit of a conciliatory note to suggest to Republicans, hey, we're not going to, ram a liberal agenda with a bunch of liberal nominees down your throat that you're going to take offense to from day one. Here's an example of someone who might be palatable to you. The interesting sort of inverse of that is that we reported yesterday that John Podesta, who of course is at the center of this WikiLeaks controversy since it was his emails that were hacked, that they're considering him for White House Chief of Staff. Obviously very qualified, did similar job for Barack Obama and for Bill Clinton, but that would be the type of thing where I think that both some conservatives and some liberals might take offense, because this guy has sort of been outed in these emails as, taking a very calculated approach towards both calibrating Hillary Clinton on the issues to appeal to liberals, and also a little bit of a dismissive tone towards some liberals and some Republicans. So that could be one where it's sort of a more traditional Clinton digging in for a big fight early on. And
certainly grist for the mill, if nothing else, beyond November 8th. Politico chief investigative reporter Ken Vogel, great stuff. Really, really do appreciate the insight.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.